What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from the Steam Next Fest, which kicked off just yesterday from the time of this video, as if the weekend wasn't exciting enough with all of the game announcement shows going on. But Steam Next Fest is ultimately a fest of upcoming games, typically through providing demos and the like for people to actually check these games out for themselves. That's the whole point. But with thousands of demos in every one of these events, it's, impossible to check all of them out, really, as it only lasts a week. So I like to make these videos talking about not only my favorites, but also getting everybody else's feedback about what their favorite demos were so I could check them out. And then the last thing I wanted to mention before we get started is that some of these games will have demos available after the festival ends, that is to say on June 16th, whereas some of them are in fact time limited, just as a heads up. Other than that, to actually jump into this thing and get started, we first got Hell Is Us. Hell Is Us has an ongoing demo showing off the action-oriented gameplay. I personally wouldn't really consider it a Souls-like from what I've played, but people keep trying to attach that label to it. Either way, though, this game takes place in a bizarre world where you're going to get dropped into a country that has been isolated from everywhere else that is being attacked by these weird extra-dimensional entities that only you seem to be able to fight with some unique weapons, while also being caught in the middle of a civil war. A lot going on with this one. I enjoyed the demo, but there's certainly a little bit of jank in there, and to that end, I think it's worth checking out for yourself to see if you like it, as this one is releasing just in September. Next up, we've got the demo for the Necromancer's Tale, an upcoming CRPG that honestly I imagine will probably wind up being a very niche experience, as it is an indie title from Psychic Software. This one is actually due out in July, and I have taken a look at it before, because it's had a demo available for quite some time, but the Steam Next Fest saw an updated demo released, so if you haven't tried this game out previously or you wanted an updated look at it, this demo is in fact new. But the Necromancer's Tale, as the name would pretty much imply, is really an origin story for a necromancer. You return home after being sent away as a child because your father has died, and in rummaging through his things, you find an occult book that puts you down the path of a necromancer and how that plays out in this town. There will be combat, you will be performing all sorts of necromantic rituals, including raising the undead to help you do your bidding. And basically it's just aiming to be a sort of necromancer simulator and sort of tell that niche narrative story. And I think that's really cool, and I'm looking forward to checking out the full release for myself, but again, I really don't think this one's going to be like a huge smash hit or anything. Keeping it moving, we then have the demo for Eriksholm, The Stolen Dream, an upcoming narrative stealth title which will see us in the role of a woman named Hannah, whose brother, Herman, has been mysteriously disappeared. We don't know where he went or what happened to him, but in searching for him, it ignites a chain of events in this town that is going to alter the history of everybody's lives in this town. Or so goes the description, but ultimately, in terms of gameplay, we're going to be using Hannah to sneak around guards and the like, utilizing distractions and things to make your way through some surprisingly open areas. I don't really get the impression that this game is going to be doing much besides this relatively simple gameplay loop, and I think it might run into some problems with just things like repetition and whether or not they can vary this up enough to maintain that sort of interest throughout the length of the title, but the narrative and how everything is presented here does look pretty interesting already, so I'm excited to see what they can do there. Next up, we've got Nightmare Frontier from Ice Code Games, which may be familiar to you if you watch my channel a lot, as they are behind both Hard West 2 as well as the recent Rogue Waters tactical game that I played not all that long ago. Nightmare Frontier, though, is, strangely enough, a combination of both of those games, I would say, utilizing mechanics and the like from each of them, but ultimately it is a roguelike title where you'll be participating in a bunch of tactical battles, fighting off these Dreadweavers, and how much you like this will come down to how much you like that. But I did think it was interesting to see how they blended the elements of both of their previous games into one for this one. Seems alright if you enjoyed those titles, though. Now, this next demo has actually been out for a while. It was just the first chance I got to take a look at it, which is actually Cairn. Cairn is a very well-received climbing title that released back in, I want to say 2024 or something like that, but is actually coming to PC later this year in, I think, November. and they've got demos of just, how that works on PC and everything. So if you want to take a look at an interesting, realistic climbing simulator for yourself, you can do that. And while it's a simple enough title, I think games like this especially do interesting things with like control schemes and the like as a novelty, if nothing else. Following on from that, we can take a look at All Will Fall, an interesting sort of physics-based city builder kind of, where you are in a world that has been completely flooded. You have to then use the scraps of what is still above water in order to build a functioning little society, gathering up the resources you need to actually survive, with things like the water level fluctuating up and down, affecting when and where you can gather resources. But in order to access all of that stuff, you have to build and maintain a bunch of like physics and weight related stuff in order to actually try to manage supplies and turn out okay and everything. This game has actually been in open beta for a while, I believe, so this is a game you could have been checking out previously, but again, it's another one that's taking part in the festival, of course. If you're into city builders, which I enjoy as a novelty, this one is doing some novel things in and of itself, and I thought that was fun to take a look at. Though speaking of odd and novel things, next up we've got Morbid Metal, a game that is strangely enough being published by Ubisoft. The game itself is a hack and slash title where we'll be utilizing various roguelike mechanics and the like in order to take some various robots we can take control of and guide them through all sorts of, I would say, very fast-paced combat encounters where, you've got that ranking system and how well you do and fight off any individual enemy is going to give you some score and stuff, and completing big waves of them gives you access to various abilities that can boost your overall stats, kind of leaning into the roguelike side of it. So if you like really fast-paced action games, I think this one might be up your alley, and it does feel pretty good to play. Now, unfortunately, while I find this next game interesting, it does not feel all that good to play, and that is Mina the Hollower, one of the games that was announced recently at one of the shows over the weekend, but this is from the developer of the game Shovel Knight. So this is their sort of next entry here, and while I think it's interesting enough, I gotta say some of the controls are very wonky. And I'm well aware this is the type of game they'll want you to play with a controller, or it'll at least come heavily suggested, but on keyboard and mouse, the sort of default interact button is J for some reason. But if that's not the kind of thing to bother you, Mina the Hollower offers a sort of retro pixelated adventure, seeing you fight off all sorts of things as you unsurprisingly try to get to the bottom of some unrest that has drawn you into the area. Though that does bring us to our last two. I wanted to call some attention to these games because they have actually had demos available previously, prior to Steam Next Fest, but we're talking about demos, so I figured I might as well give them a shout out. And these are Every Day We Fight, as well as Solasta 2. So Every Day We Fight is an upcoming TRPG that I think is doing some fun things, and is, I believe, releasing on July 10th. Whereas Solasta 2 is much farther off, but is utilizing 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to, of course, continue the Solasta name on a different continent and tell a different story, of course, but is already shaping up to be very promising and looking like a big step up from the previous entry of Solasta 1. Supposedly, they've got an announcement of some sort planned for just a little later this week, so we might actually be talking about Solasta here pretty soon as well, but I definitely think the demo for it is worth checking out either way. As for today and this video, though, I think that pretty well does it. Those are the demos I was able to take a look at and I thought were especially interesting, but as I mentioned at the top of the video, with there being thousands of demos in every single one of these events, it is simply impossible for me to have played every single one, and so I would love to know what, if any of them, you are taking a look at, so I can take a look at them and put them on my radar if they are in fact interesting enough. But as for this video, that's pretty well gonna wrap it up. Certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.